Donald Trump continues to say the political system is rigged, even as he heads into his home state of New York with a large edge over Ted Cruz. With 1,237 delegates needed for the nomination, our latest CBS Battleground tracker shows Trump polling at 54% compared to Cruz at 21% and Kasich at 19%, respectively. Meanwhile, both back in New York after high-profile trips of different sorts, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are spending their Sundays looking ahead to Tuesday's primary. Clinton continues to lead Sanders in New York, 53% to 43%, in a state widely considered crucial to both campaigns. CBS News political director and Face the Nation host John Dickerson is with me now from Washington. John, I want to ask, Trump has a huge lead here in New York, where I am. If Trump does follow through with the win here, does this help avoid a contested convention, or does he need to start picking up some of these smaller delegate states?
Well, it helps a lot. Two things to watch for with both of these races: the momentum, the narrative, the story we'll all talk about, and then the actual numbers. If he wins, if he gets over 50% in New York, that'll give him a bonus, a little extra push on the delegate count. He needs to do very well, not just in New York, but in all the future states. And doing well first in New York could suggest that he'll be able to do equally as well in the important states he needs. But it's still probably, if he's going to go over the top, we're going to have to wait till the 7th of June in California. So, on the other hand, winning in New York at all by 30 points, let's say he comes in just under 50%, that's still a big deal. It rights the ship after his difficult experience both in Wisconsin, where he lost, but also in the rumbly days before Wisconsin, where his campaign seemed a little off track. And it also beats back a little bit the stories about how badly he's been outmaneuvered by Ted Cruz over the last several weeks, repeatedly in states where Cruz is getting his people to go in the delegate slots and not him. So those are the things to watch for in terms of what final number he gets.
You know, something interesting that's gone on this weekend, Trump continued to be critical of the party's nomination process, even as he leads it. Saturday night, especially, he railed against the party over what he is calling a rigged system. You played that soundbite for RNC Chair Reince Priebus this morning and asked for his reaction. Let's go ahead and listen to it.
The system is a bad, bad system, and they got to do something about it. The Republican National Committee, they better get going, because I'll tell you what, you're going to have a rough July at that convention.
Do you take that as a threat?
Not particularly. I don't know if it's hyperbole or positioning, but the truth is that there are facts, and the RNC doesn't have the power to change the rules between now and the convention. The rules were set years ago, and each state's delegate system was set in October of 2015, and it's up to the delegates at the convention to decide what they're going to do about rules, and it's up to each individual state over the next 4 years to decide how they're going to allocate delegates. So I don't take it personally, John, because when I kind of just rest in the truth, and you know, it matters when something is right and something is wrong to me.
I have to ask, what political message is Trump sending with his continued fight with the GOP? Is this a strategy to show how broken the system is? And does that really work with voters, John?
I think it's a double-pronged strategy. In the short term, here's a candidate who has very high untrustworthiness numbers, who is now becoming the fairness candidate, who's essentially saying, I just want to be treated fairly, and it's fair play if the person who gets the most delegates and has the most votes gets the nomination. That just stands to reason. And there are a lot of people for whom that makes perfect sense. So in the short term, he now is turning his candidacy into not only I'm going to fight for America, but I'm fighting for fairness. And it means that he gets a conversation and can talk about whenever he wants and at length, in which he, in the morality play, is the hero. And he's fighting against the system that a lot of Republicans don't like, not the specific system of allocating delegates, but the system in which the elites, including in their own party, have a bunch of fancy answers to why nothing is getting done that makes sense. And so he's echoing the underlying theme of his campaign now in his own fight to succeed. Then what he's doing is, by the time he gets to Cleveland, he wants people to think, so many people to think, that fairness is at stake here, that he increases the pain that a Republican Party would have to feel or would feel if they somehow had a nominating vote and he didn't win and come out as the nominee. So that all the delegates, if they do actually end up having to vote for a first ballot, second ballot presidential choice, will think, gee, I better support Donald Trump, because if I don't, people are going to riot, it's going to seem unfair, it's going to make the party look like it's rigged. all of which makes it more likely that they would, or at least in Trump's theory, that they would stick with Trump.
It's something we've been talking about for weeks now, and our battleground tracker showing Republican voters in New York seem to agree with Trump. 52% say the Republican system is unfair. How does this play into other states moving forward? That's just one poll here in New York, John.
Right. And in New York, where he has such an advantage with the voters there, they are, based on what we know from the way people respond to polls, if they like the guy at the top, they're likely to do and respond to future questions based on whether that question advantages that guy or not, sort of regardless of the underlying theory of the case underneath it. So New York's a little bit of a tricky state to look at. But other data points we have in the Battleground Tracker poll, the number of people in California, a state where Trump is ahead, but not ahead by the gargantuan margin that he is in New York, they think it's the number, I think, is in the 40s, who say that the person with the plurality of delegates should get the nomination. I think that's still he wins on that question in California, but not by the margin he does in New York. In Wisconsin, in the exit polls, Republicans who voted in that state for Ted Cruz and not Donald Trump, Trump lost by double digits. Nevertheless, nearly 60% of the people surveyed in the exit polls in the Wisconsin primary said they believe the person who goes to the nomination with the most delegates and the most votes should get the nomination. So he's got kind of the party on his side in terms of, again, this just basic argument about fairness.
Interesting. So on Saturday as well, Cruz won the 14 presidential delegates up for grabs in Wyoming. What does that mean for Trump, and what does it mean for Cruz?
Well, it means for Trump that he was denied 14 delegates to get himself on the march to that 1,237 that he needs. Things are tight enough that he kind of needs every delegate he can get. What it means for Cruz is that he has been successful in planning and doing all the things you're supposed to do by the rules and the expectations of the political process to get delegates in those slots that will be favorable to him. So he has played a very smart inside game. Donald Trump has been sort of outmaneuvered in this, not because the rules have necessarily been changed at the last minute or snuck in, but just because he didn't pay attention to this portion of the test, and he's now trying to play catch up.
It's interesting. I want to move to Democrats now. Bernie Sanders told you he still thinks he can win New York. Let's listen to that.
You know, we're going into Tuesday here. We're fighting hard, and I think we have a real shot to win on Tuesday if there is a large voter turnout. But even here in New York State, you have a voting system which makes it impossible for independents to participate in the Democratic primary, that makes it impossible for people to register on the day of the election, which many states do, which is going to result in a lower voter turnout than I would like to see.
Our battleground, John, shows that Clinton is leading Sanders by 10 points in New York. He did give up critical campaign time in New York while visiting the Pope this weekend. What does that indicate to you?
I think it indicates that in a New York media market where his smallest scratch of his cheek is going to get covered, that he gets to be covered in the New York market over at the Vatican, talking about the issues that he cares about. The fact that the Pope would have him there underlies a sort of sense of seriousness of his own candidacy, but also the issues the Pope is talking about are the issues Bernie Sanders is talking about in terms of climate change and inequality and those things that politicians can do to help the least among us. So it reinforces the brand. It gets a different set of pictures, different kinds of pictures. He's not eating a pastrami on rye. He's over there with the leader of the Catholic faith, or at least in the Vatican. So I think it probably helps Bernie Sanders more than it hurts him in terms of what's going on in the New York primary.
It's interesting, though. He spends the weekend with the Pope. Hillary Clinton, much different big name. She's at a fundraiser at the California home of George Clooney Saturday night. Do you think it was smart of George Clooney to go on another talk show today and say, you know, this is just how it is. It is an obscene amount of money. Does that help Hillary at all? Let's take a listen.
Do you look at it yourself and think that's an obscene amount of money?
Yes, I think it's an obscene amount of money. I think that, you know, we had some protesters last night when we pulled up in San Francisco, and they're right to protest. They're absolutely right. It is an obscene amount of money. The Sanders campaign, when they talk about it, is absolutely right.
No, it doesn't. I mean, what helps Hillary is that he's a star and people flock to stars. And so that kind of head-turning attention is it's okay to be, you know, if they're turning their head for Clooney, then she gets in the same line of vision. That probably in bulk is helpful to her. But in a Democratic primary in which a lot of people, and in a country in which a lot of people think that the system as it is, where those with the most money have the most influence, anything that exacerbates or underlines or reaffirms that central truth and yet seems sort of okay with it will certainly inspire and stir up those people who are supporting Bernie Sanders from the get-go because they think the system is out of whack.
John Dickerson, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jamie.